Rock and Stone Miners. I'm your host, Get Good Fox, and welcome to this week's Deep Dive plus Elite Deep Dive weekly walkthrough guide for the week of March 9th, 2023. That's right, I'm going to take you through the Deep Dive and the Elite Deep Dive. I'll show you the mission conditions and give you recommendations on what I did to overcome them so that you can bring home those awesome Matrix cores. And I've got good news. This week isn't as difficult as either the week or the week before that one, so this might be a good time to try your first Elite Deep Dive, especially if you have at least one other friend to go with, because cooperation, I think, is probably more important than just like pure player skill. Anyways, if you'd like to see the entire Deep Dive experience, I do play it every Thursday on Twitch, where you can see me go through the whole thing, and remember, if you missed it, you can catch it on Twitch as a VOD, or on my other YouTube channel at Get Good Fox VODs, where I upload all of the Twitch streams there in case you don't like Twitch and you missed it. Anyways, let's go ahead and get started with the Deep Dive, which is going to take place on the sand-blasted corridors. Mission 1 will be Hazard 3 difficulty, and your objectives are to salvage 3 mini-mules. Yes, that does mean you will have to go through the complete drop pod defense sequence at the very end. You'll also need to collect 2 alien eggs. One of the eggs will trigger a swarm, but to make things a little spicier, there is a mutator in effect, and it is warning lethal enemies. What this does is cause all the enemies to do 100% more melee damage, but only melee damage. So spitting attacks, stomping attacks, self-destructing attacks, they will get no benefit from the lethal enemies bonus. Overall, this should still be a fairly routine Hazard 3 mission. You shouldn't really have any trouble with it. Remember, each of the mini-mules does have nitra, so even if you're not mining a lot of nitra, you might have more than you expect as you are recovering the mini-mules. And overall, the main way to counter these lethal enemies is just to kind of stay relatively close together. The weakness of Hazard 3 is that they don't generate enough enemies, and as a result, if you stay together, you can just blast them away and thin them out, and they'll never have the numbers to really get in there and start chewing you up and using that lethal enemies bonus. But if you go off on your own, yeah, you could get ambushed if you're unobservant and get chewed up, and yes, you will take quite a bit of damage from those lethal enemies, but overall, shouldn't really be a deal. Let's move on to Mission 2. So Mission 2 bumps the difficulty up to Hazard 3.5. I don't really think the 0.5 is a really major deciding factor, though. Your objectives are to collect 4 alien eggs, expect 1 swarm of them, and to repair 2 mini-mules. So this is like the first mission, just without the drop pod recovery process. You just have to put the mini-mules back together and repair them. You will still get the nitra out of the mules, though, which is nice. There's a mutator in effect, and it is the kind of nasty warning shield disruption. This means that you cannot have any shields, but attacks from hostile things will do 30% less damage, so that means enemies and like hostile effects in the level, like poison gas or lightning. It doesn't count towards friendly fire, though, or falling damage. Overall, though, once again, this shouldn't be too big of a deal. Remember that you can heal through your drop pods as well. So once again, stay together, try to watch your friendly fire, and you should be able to blast away the enemies and thin them out where they don't have too much of an opportunity to actually get attacks on you. Try not to go off on your own, and if you do, let people know that you're doing it. Let's go ahead and move on, though, to Mission 3, which is going to keep the game at a Hazard 3.5 difficulty. Your objectives will be to protect the drill dozer, so an escort mission, and, well, what do you know? You got to repair 2 more mini-mules. You do not have to go through the whole drop pod thing, but the mini-mules will have more nitra in them, and by now you probably have a solid amount. So, just so that we don't, like, mess anything up at the 11th hour, a few tips for escort. First off, there is no 4th mission, so just use all of your nitra at the very end. Just drop it all in, and as a result, throw everything you've got at the enemies. Use your defensive tools. If you're an engineer, that's really awesome. Put down those turrets. Use your proximity mines or your lures. Those are great for just automating your defense. You can blow up the enemies as they attack. The turrets will gun down enemies as they attack. You could use the lures to, like, pull some of the enemies off and confuse them, and then you've always got to deal well with the Amarin rocks and the beamers. The gunner is pretty good here. The gunner doesn't have to reload too frequently, meaning he's able to really spray down those rocks one after the other, and the gunner's primary also can be used to destroy the beamers, shoot for the tips on them, and eventually they'll go dormant, like they change like a very dim color, you know they're dead. Overall though, do that, pull in the ammo, reload, be generous with all of your equipment, and it shouldn't be a problem, and you're bringing home all the Matrix cores. But let's get real here. Why settle for 3 Matrix cores when you can have 6? I did say that this Elite Deep Dive is easier than some of the ones in the past, so if you've never tried an Elite Deep Dive before, maybe you give this one a shot. You could pull off your first big-time victory. Stay tuned to the guide. I'll walk you through it. I'll do what I can to help you score big. So, Elite Deep Dive takes place in the Dense Biozone. Mission 1 has a difficulty of 4.5, and what is the objective? Well, protect the drill dozer and repair 2 mini mules. If you're getting deja vu from the 3rd mission of the normal deep dive, good, because they are exactly the same. That said, this is Hazard 4.5, so it will be harder. There will be a lot more enemies, and they will do more damage, but most important of all, you're in the Dense Biozone, so that means Neticites, those annoying, flying, zappy jellyfish guys, and they don't really care about the drill dozer. They're going to come after you, so in the final sequence, you will need to protect the drill dozer and yourself simultaneously. So do yourself a favor and bring an engineer, because you need automation. You need to multitask, and sometimes you need to do one thing while simultaneously also protecting the drill dozer. And that's why the engineer, well, you got your turrets. Turrets are great. They will continue fighting the enemies. They will shred those neticites as long as you keep them loaded, but that's why you got multitasking. You've also got lures or proximity mines. Those also automate the experience. You can throw them down and grab some ammo. They let you fight while not having to directly participate in the battle at the same time. Your smart rifle and your shard diffractor are going to pay off big here. Both of them are great against the rocks. The gunner also very good here. He's got great sustained firepower, going to be able to hose down all of those bugs as they attack and not have to reload too much. He will smash the rocks, and all of his primary weapons are capable of destroying the beamers. Shoot for the tips, and when they go dim, you know they have gone inactive. But otherwise, this is still going to be more or less like a Hazard 4 drill dozer escort mission. So it shouldn't be too bad. If you want, run a Hazard 4 escort on your own and get used to it, because it will be fairly similar. Now onwards to mission 2. There's a little bit of stuff going on during this mission, so listen carefully. Difficulty is up to Hazard 5. Objectives are to refine liquid morkite. I experienced 2 breakdowns during the pumping sequence, and you'll need to collect 150 morkite. Now the catch here is that there are 2 mutators in effect. The first is warning, exploder infestation. This will cause a frequent squad of exploders to spawn in and come and try to blow you up, which will be devastating on Hazard 5. There is also the anomaly for rich atmosphere, which is going to increase your movement speed by 50% and give you a higher pitched voice. So, here are my tips on this mission. First off, there is a drop site ambush. That's what I like to call it, when you drop into the mission and the enemies are already there, pre-spawned and waiting for you. So if you just rush out there, you could get owned immediately. Another thing to know is that there's a ton of nitra in this level. At one point in time, I had almost 500 nitra. So here are my tips though. Number 1. You can stay inside the pod for a bit, especially to clear out some of the initial enemies. If you're an engineer, you can even set up your turrets inside the pod to help you gun the enemies down. Keep in mind that the exploders will still be spawning and coming in, and you cannot do this for too long, because the first wave, the first official swarm wave, is coming, so you can only stay in for a little while. Just use it to clear some of the initial enemies out. The second thing to know is the terrain isn't super cooperative, so if you just rush out there in a disorganized manner, you may get caught on some terrain, you may fall into a pit. It's not terrible, but it can be in the beginning when you're bewildered by, oh my god, it's like a D-Day landing. So be careful, stick together, neutralize the enemies in a calm but determined manner. Like, you do need to get out of the starting area, you do need to get to the refinery, but don't go fast and don't go slow. Now, beware of some of the pre-spawned enemies you could encounter, things like a Spitball Infector, a Brood Nexus. A Spitball Infector could be really bad on a high difficulty. They do tons of damage. They are fairly fragile, though. Now, these are my steps towards victory. Step 1. Clear out the initial enemies while inside your pod. Poke out quickly, see if you hear that bleh noise of a Spitball Infector trying to shell you. If you don't hear anything, then you can leave, you can set up, move together, and start going for the refinery. Use the refinery as kind of like an anchor point in your mind so that you can then explore from there and you can fall back as necessary. Once you can get past that, once you clear out the initial enemies, once you clear out the cave of the pre-spawned enemies, the difficulty will drop tremendously and it becomes kind of a routine mission, not quite because of the frequent spawning of the exploders, and it is still Hazard 5, but if you can just get past the beginning, as I said, the difficulty is just going to absolutely tank because there is so much ammo. Feel free to use some of it. You're probably going to go into the 3rd level with like 300 nitra or so. Also, one last thing to know, I did have a bulk detonator appear. That doesn't mean it'll appear for you. You might have 2 instead of 1. But 1 did appear for me, so just keep that in the back of your mind. Anyways, on to the last mission. Mission 3. Difficulty is now Hazard 5.5. Objectives are to salvage 3 mules. It does say salvage, so you will have to do the whole drop pod defense thing. You'll also need to kill 1 dreadnought, and it'll be the Dreadnought Twins, and there is a mutator in effect. Warning. Rival presence. That means there's going to be a ton of rival stuff, so the patrol bots, you'll have turrets, you'll have shredders, there will be a turret controller controlling all of the turrets, and if you can disable the controller, that will destroy the remaining turrets. Normally you get a nemesis as well, the big like crab arms chop you up tramp chomp guy, but I didn't get one. I'm not going to tell you to not beware of a nemesis, just be aware that I did not find a nemesis. I was never interfered by one throughout the experience. Overall, though, my tips here is that this is not a super difficult mission, surprisingly. It is kind of a routine salvage operation. You should have an absolute truck ton of nitra, and you should be able to just use that nitra to just blast the enemies away at the end of the mission. That said, you will have to deal with the boss first. So, the Dreadnought Twins are probably the easiest of the fights. My main advice here is to try to damage them evenly in order to avoid their healing mechanic too much. The way they heal is the Dreadnought that has lower health heals to catch up to the Dreadnought with higher health. So if you keep their health similar, the healing will be very minor. They are kind of fragile, they're kind of squishy, they don't have as much armor as the other Dreadnoughts, so just shoot them, fight them at a mid-range so that their kind of shotgun-style attacks have a lower chance of hitting you, and overall, the twins should not be the hard part of this mission. The defense part also shouldn't be too bad, once again, if you brought an engineer, especially if you've got lures. What I did is, since I had so much nitra, I literally just threw down a lure for every minute of the fight. The moment the lure deactivated, just threw another one down, and then I just got more ammo. Threw 2 lures, grabbed some ammo. I had lures for all 3 of the defensive scenes, and the bugs were just constantly attacking the lures rather than us. The turrets were gunning them down, my buddy was gunning them down, and it was actually super easy because we had so much ammo. I could just afford to throw lures the entire time. We didn't let our guard down though, and he was more than ready to use his gunner shields to protect us, because you do fight a fairly mixed group of enemies, a little bit of everything, including dangerous Mactera Trijaws, but overall, this is honestly not the difficult mission, especially if you brought characters that excel at defensive situations, which you absolutely should. Get that engineer out at the minimum. Anyways, let's go ahead and wrap things up with my conclusions. What characters do I recommend? What kind of loadouts should you bring? And honestly, I'm just going to kind of lump the deep dive and the elite deep dive together, because you should just bring an engineer and a gunner to every single one of these missions because they are so similar. The theme of this week are defensive operations and very little, if anything, in the way of bosses, depending on if you're going to go to the Elite Deep Dive. But there's so much defense. There's drop pod defense, there's the Morkite refinement, there's the salvage operation, there's just defense, 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 defense. That's why the gunner and the engineer are going to be so good. Engineer's got the turrets, the lures, the ability to just entrench and hold things down and multitask. The gunner has the shield. Shields are insane. Throw down a shield and revive somebody. Throw down a shield on an ammo pod and everyone can reload their weapons without being crushed by enemies, harassed by enemies. It's so, so good. If you are on a defense objective and need to hold out for a certain amount of time, the shield lets you stay inside the objective and capture the objective as quickly as possible. Combine that with the lures to get the enemies off of you and have your gunner bring the tactical lead burster, let the enemies clump around the lure, throw in the lead burster, and it will just absolutely mince all of the enemies around. It's a beautiful thing to see when you got a nasty lead burster going off. If you do that, that's going to work on basically every one of the missions. That is such a good setup if you're efficient with it. Also remember that in between the phases of the deep dive, all of your secondary equipment is automatically fully reloaded. So if you had no ammo for your turret, you will go to the next mission and all of your turret ammo is maxed out. The same is true of the gunner's shields. The shields, you could be completely out and they will all be given back to you the next mission. So use them. Throw out those shields, use those turrets. They are going to be refilled in the following mission. Do that, and I think you'll find that you can bring order to chaos, crush the enemies effectively, and you should be walking home with 6 Matrix cores. Anyways, thank you all for tuning in for this guide walkthrough of this week's Deep Dive plus Elite Deep Dive. Remember, if you want to catch me live, you can find me on Twitch, where I play Deep Rock Galactic, especially the Deep Dives on Thursday, but I play on other days as well at Twitch at GetGoodFox. And if you don't like Twitch, don't forget that I upload all of the streams to my VODs channel, which is Get Good Fox VODs on YouTube. Anyways, see you next time, miners. Rock and stone, and remember that you don't have to be good to get good.